Well, good evening, everybody. It is Sunday, March 2nd at 7:03 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I'm going to go ahead and call this special meeting of the Libertarian National Committee to order. My name is Stephen Akela, Chairman of the LNC, and I'll hand it off to Secretary Harlos to go ahead and take roll. Ms. Harlos?
Okay, so Mr. Nikhil is present. Mr. Dar,
Present.
I am here. Mr. Redpath,
Yes.
Mr. Bost,
Here.
Mr. Malagan,
Present.
Mr. Vincent,
Here.
Mr. Watkins,
Here.
Ms. Yanuskavich,
Here.
Mr. Chatterton.
Here.
Did Mr. Dassing come in and I missed him? No, Mr. Dassing's not present. Mr. Ford,
Here.
Ms. Hayes.
Here.
Hold on one second. Great. Mr. Lamb,
Here.
Mr. McGee,
Present.
Mr. Nana. Mr. Nana is absent. Mr. Thompson,
Here.
Mr. Bracco,
Here.
Ms. Cowart. I believe I saw Jesse Cowart.
Sorry, I was
Oh.
on mute. I'm here. Thank you.
Ms. Housley,
I'm here.
Mr. Hirsch,
Here.
Mr. Johnson, Matt Johnson,
I'm here, sorry.
Mr. Weir. Okay, so Mr. Chair, everyone is present except for Mr. Dassing, who that region will then be represented by Mr. Bracco. Mr. Nana, that region will be represented by Mr. Hirsch, and alternate Mr. Weir is present, but Mr. Ford is here, so it doesn't affect Region 6.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much, Ms. Harlos. We'll go ahead and move on to opportunity for public comment. 2 minutes each. We don't have a whole lot of time. Today's meeting is capped out at 2 hours, so we'll end at 9:03. We can't extend time, unfortunately. So is there any public comment at this time? Anybody who'd like to speak for public comment? I see Mr. Roos. Mr. Roos, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman Nikhil. I just wanted to say congratulations on becoming the first member of our distinct society, the Browns, to be the chair of the Libertarian National Committee. All hail Florida, and you will be nominated as presiding officer if you show up to the next state convention. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our people are proud, and so are Florida men everywhere. So I appreciate it.
I object to Florida being considered a place.
Overruled, Mr. Malagon.
There.
All right. Anybody else seeking to speak for public comment? Going once, going twice.
I can't. I will.
Mr. Jacobs, go ahead, sir.
Yes, I just wanted to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to represent you before the Judicial Committee. I hope that the circumstance will not be repeated anytime soon, but thank you.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate it, JJ. I really thank you for your service there. All right. Anybody else? If not, that concludes public comment. Next up is the consent agenda. We have a few items on the consent agenda. Any item can be pulled from it. Otherwise, we're just going to vote on it up or down and then move on to the regular agenda. So we have the pro forma correction to policy manual, the policy manual change from EPCC, and APRC wants to be assigned the task of reviewing the immigration issue page. Does anybody have anything they'd like to pull from the agenda for consideration? Mr. Malagon, you recognize, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to remove the third item from the consent agenda. That's the assign APRC task of, sorry, I lost it because it scrolled up, but.
I'm sorry. One moment, Mr.
No, that's
Malagan.
fine. That's fine. I would just like to, if we're going to do that, vote on that separately. The other two can stay.
I would
Okay.
second Mr. Magalon's request.
As
All
much
right.
as I do appreciate MAGA, it is Malagon, just to be clear.
I do apologize.
So we'll go ahead and move that to the end of the agenda, Madam Secretary. Anything else? All right. If not, do we have any objection to the remaining two motions on the consent agenda? All right. Hearing none, then we can go ahead and move on to new business with previous notice. Authorization of the sale of 1444 Duke Street, Alexandria, Virginia, moved by Mr. Watkins. Is there a second on this?
I'll second it.
I think I heard Mr. Lamb second. So,
Thank you.
Mr. Watkins, if you'd like to go ahead and speak to your motion.
Sure. So, I don't want to get off track too much. I would like to keep any discussion on this strictly to either selling or not selling. Any FEC questions, tax questions, I think can wait. And if all the LNC members have reviewed the timeline that I provided, I appreciate those that read through that. And I would prefer not to have to repeat anything that has been addressed in that. So the roof is leaking pretty badly. Apparently this has been going on for a while, and it was thought to have been resolved, and it, I guess, was not. And it was not known how bad it was until recently. We were planning on originally leasing HQ until, we were able to find a buyer. A buyer was identified, and a sale price has been agreed upon with them at $650. The building was appraised for $840. This did not take into account the damages, anything related to leaks, could be mold, electrical problems, whatever it is. There was no real estate agent that would have to be paid. This would just be basically just cutting our losses, getting rid of the building for now, and later on the LNC can discuss whether or not they would like to purchase another one or what have you. That's pretty much it. I would strongly encourage everybody to vote in favor of selling the building. We do not have any staff in the area. If any major problems were to occur, it would be very hard for us to get somebody there to address that. We cannot afford to fix the roof as it stands. We cannot afford to pay staff to relocate themselves and their families to the most expensive area in the country to fill HQ. And we are paying somewhere around 23 grand a year to keep it with utilities, condo fees, things like that. So that's pretty much where we're at.
Thank you, Mr. Watkins. Mr. Redpath.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I know Mr. Watkins just said that he did not want to address FEC matters, but I do want to communicate that, and I'm not sure how much I don't know whether we should go to executive session to discuss certain matters, but I will say that I have been in touch with Paula Edwards, our FEC consultant, on this matter. And she has done some analysis for us. Unfortunately, I don't have it. She has an email problem today, and she was going to send it to me prior to this meeting, but it has not come through. I've checked my spam, I've checked my inbox, and she says she doesn't know what's happened, but this analysis that she's done, I think, would be very valuable regarding what to do. But she does advise, or she does recommend, just to make sure we've got our bases covered here, that we ask the Federal Election Commission for an advisory opinion regarding what we can do with the proceeds from the sale of the building. I have received counseling from her at this point that that it would probably be to our benefit to do that. We probably will have there's a very good likelihood that we will be able to do, according to her, that we'll be able to do what we like with the proceeds, and that we won't be restricted in spending the proceeds in any particular way. But I strongly agree with her that we should seek an advisory opinion from the FEC before we move forward on this matter.
And Mr. Chair, just note that I can't.
I saw you.
Yeah, I can't raise my
Yeah.
hand, so.
Go ahead, Ms. Harlows, and then Mr. Watkins, and
Mr.
then
Watkins
Ms.
was
Scavenge.
Yes.
Was it-
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Redpath. I have already submitted an advisory opinion, and I did communicate with the FEC, and I addressed this in my timeline that is in the confidential OneNote. They did not have anything relevant to the situation and advised that I submit an advisory opinion. That leads me to the conclusion that you have from Paula, that we could probably use the funds for whatever we wish. But again, I also addressed this previously. I think we should, whatever the funds are, or I'm sorry, whenever we get the funds, I agree we should put them in an account until we know further. And that gives us time to talk about what we would like to use them for.
Ms. Harlows?
Yeah, now just everyone's information, Alt-Y on Windows. If you're ever struggling to figure out how to raise your hand, you lost your screen, it will give you it, and Option Y on a Mac. I'm somewhat reluctant, to be honest with you, without knowing, because I don't want to risk it, and I haven't made up my mind one way or another. I'm just letting you know, I don't want to risk. We have our investment, and then we find out from the FEC that it can't be used, and we have to scramble to find another building with this much because of the damages. $650,000 isn't a lot of money to buy a building. And I do just want to bring forward a concern that a donor did say to me that I did address, I believe privately, either with Mr. Dar or Mr. Nikela, that there was a donor who maxed out on the building fund and also maxed out to the general fund. And this donor expressed concern that our decision could put them in violation of FEC donation limits, since they will have effectively, this was a while ago, so we're talking about maybe had given $55,000, $60,000 when the limits were $28,000, $29,000. And I don't know if that's a legitimate concern or not. I don't know FEC stuff, but that was a concern addressed to me by a donor.
All right, well, thank you, Karen Ann. Next is Ms. Scavenge.
I was just going to suggest that if we do vote to sell the building, that any proceeds from that go into a segregated account so that we can later on determine what the appropriate use of that money is. And I'm not sure if we need an amendment to Mr. Watkins's motion to make that happen, but I wouldn't, it can't go into our operating fund.
Correct, and I agree. And I had planned on making an amendment if necessary, so we can workshop that.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
I would recommend if we do that, we could put it in a high yield savings or something like that, the 4.5% interest if we decide to go that route. So we can make sure if this all goes through that I can talk to staff about that, and certainly whatever the board ultimately decides. Mr. Ford?
Just if I could touch on the practical for a moment, with Doge in full effect at a level I don't think any one of us would have anticipated, what we're facing here is a potential free fall of the Washington, D.C. housing market, I say commercial housing. You've got very real potential of emptying large government buildings, even if it's just for a temporary period of time. The market's already in a state of virtual collapse there. in terms of, again, of commercial housing. And while I never want to rush to judgment on anything, there is an element of time of the essence. In reflecting with people in my region, there is real concern from a number of folks who are donors that we have to respect. And I would recommend a couple of things. Obviously, as Mr. McKellen said, placing the money in a high yield investment account so that we could realize some profit over that, and that money be kept segregated with those funds until a decision is made. I think, Rich Bowen and I looked at this a couple of years ago, and from day one, I think this and prior LNCs have recognized that the folks who made these donations, that made this building happen, their needs to be heard and respected. So I would request, after the sale is made, that we indulge them. And I mean, I say that with a smile, but we engage with them with their attitudes, and that we have some sort of survey process so that it's fair and open. And then when a decision is if you will, proposed, that there be an electronic vote so that folks actually have the time to go out to their regions and discuss it with those folks as well as newer members. So I believe there needs to be a real respect for process here. And with that, we'll make a decision that'll be fair and open. So I encourage the sale of the building post haste. If we can close on it tomorrow before somebody wakes up to the reality of what's about to happen in DC, and then reflect back and take the time to do a proper analysis and proper reflection. Thank you.
It would have been much better.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. Mr. Lamb?
Yes, I would strongly agree with Ms. Yanisevich and with in other statements from Mr. Watkins as well as Mr. Ford. I think this is something that we do need to move forward with, but I would like to see it segregated into a separate account just to ensure that these concerns are accurately validated before we move forward with using these funds for any other purpose.
Ms. Hayes, did you still wish to speak?
Sorry, no, I was going to suggest the segregated high yield interest account. So never mind.
All right. Mr. Boss, do you still wish to speak, sir? I'll guess no. Mr. Malagon.
I was just going to call the question, but we haven't heard from Mr. Thompson, so I'd like to hear what he has to say. I think that I'll just throw in my 2 cents. I was going to suggest what Ms. Yanisevich suggested, and then on top of that, just say that this is a no-brainer. We can deal with everything else after the fact, but I'll yield to Mr. Thompson.
Go ahead, Mr. Thompson.
Yeah, I'd be shocked if anyone does not want to segregate the funds, so I don't think that's going to be an issue. Since the water damage was not taken into account with the appraisal, and the appraisal was late last year, right? Does that indicate that the damage was very recent then, right? Like we had some damage over time, but
so the damage, I think it began in late 2021, and I think it was identified fairly early according to minutes from that time, and I believe some work was done, but I'm not able to validate that. And nothing else was noticed until one of the trips that I made with a couple of other volunteers just to kind of reorganize everything, get rid of office supplies, that kind of thing, move stuff to the basement. And I guess it started raining that day. Luckily we were there and we noticed it. I think this was probably about a year ago or so. And then this would have been like March of last year. And then, things got kind of crazy with the Convention Oversight Committee. I ended up joining that.
So we just let it leak for a year?
Kind of. I mean, there wasn't really much we could have done. And as I addressed previously, a roofer did take a visit. I don't think he charged anything to inspect the roof. It was sunny that day, and he noticed some tears in the membrane, but nothing huge. And there's I guess it's around the HVAC system that there's like a kind of a rusted flap that I guess can go up and down if the wind blows. But it was not known until recently why the leak was so bad, because the roofer was unable to identify why the front, the front offices would be
Okay.
flooding. So it turns out that it is not sloped properly. So the water is just pooling on top of the roof, and I guess it could be just seeping through those small cuts in the membrane. And
Okay. So, I mean, do you feel like it was a couple of $100,000 worth of damage?
it could be.
Okay.
We don't know. We don't
So
know what we don't
it's
know until we start hacking away. So anybody
right,
that
right.
owns a
It's just
house or a car or any kind of asset that has anything wrong with it, it's always worse than it looks on the outside. And
right. If I were selling my house and I had it appraised, and then a couple of months later someone was like, "Oh yeah, it's worth 200 grand less than it was appraised for," I would have questions about it, right? Like, do we have, since it was not accounted for in the appraisal, it seems like some of the worst damage must have been recent. Because I assume the appraiser, went inside the building.
he did, and I assume
Right.
that
So
he
I mean,
noticed.
if there's like, $100,000-$200,000 of damage, I would expect that the appraiser would be like, "Oh, there's like a giant puddle of water here."
Not necessarily. They
Okay.
could. I think it just depends on the appraiser, and you
Would
can
it
always order a second opinion. I
right?
did look at.
Which I get is my lengthy point here is would we be wise to see if the 650 figure is fair at this point?
I believe that it is fair. I think waiting for another appraisal and then potentially not having a buyer, and then later on having to fix the roof anyway, and then having to hire an agent to find a buyer,
Right.
I think we're
And
going to end up right back where we are, even if we sold it at what it was appraised for.
okay,
I
and
do
do we
appraisals for
not
a
carry?
living. I ran it by a certified general appraiser in Virginia. Didn't see anything wrong with the appraisal itself. I looked at the comps. I really don't think you're going to find any better comps. I mean, we're I even if we fixed it, we can't afford to fix it anyway. Even if we did, we're just going to end up. We're going to be doing more steps to end up right back where we're at right now.
And do we not carry insurance on the property that would
As
cover a
stated
water leak?
previously, we do have insurance. However, this is wear and tear and would therefore not be covered. We
Okay.
cannot file a claim on wear and tear.
And I'll just say as an aside that we've been having roof issues for as long as I remember. Those of us who've been on the board for a long time remember we thought we'd fix those issues, but they did reoccur. Just sprinkling in some extra information there. Ms. Harlows?
Yeah, again, I'm not going to repeat what I said before, but there's information I feel we're lacking. And again, this could just be because I'm listening to various people who allegedly know more than I do. But since I know virtually nothing about FEC, the chances of people knowing more than I do is probably extremely high. What I have heard is we would have to buy another building, which is fine with me. I like us having a building. I don't like this building. I never have. But I have heard that we have to get another building within 6 months. And if that turns out to be the case, let's just mind the subjunctive here, say that turns out to be the case. Are we prepared for that?
If I could touch on this, several of us last term did meet and discuss this potentially happening, and it was assumed that we would sell at the price that we purchased it for or higher. And if we were to have done that, in order to avoid capital gains, we would then have 180 days to roll that over into another building. Since we would be selling below what we paid for, we wouldn't be gaining anything. We would be at a loss. And I think that point is just moot at that. Because I asked them this, and again, I did address this in the advisory when I submitted for the advisory opinion, and I asked the FEC on the phone about this, and they didn't have any information for me, which is why I submitted the opinion. So
I did have a follow-up though. So are we prepared? Let's just say, I'm just trying to war game out the potentials. Let's say we hear back from the FEC and they say you have to buy another building. Let's remove the whole 6 months thing. or refund the money. I mean, are we prepared to deal with that? And I'm sure there would have to be some kind of timeline if their answer was you have to buy a building or refund the money. Are we prepared to deal with either eventuality?
I think we are going to have to, because right now it's a net drain.
Right. I
So,
understand.
yeah. So, I mean, either way, so if that is the case, all three options we lose. You know,
Thank you, Mr. Watkins.
yep.
All right, Miss Halsey or Halsey? How do I pronounce your last name?
It's Hallisey.
Halsey, Miss Halsey.
So I'm a commercial property manager in my real life. And Adrian, thank you. And just a basic roof typically will cost between $35 and $40 per square foot. So we're like, if we wanted to replace this roof, just the roof would be close to 100 grand. So, and I just did a cursory Google search, and if this is considered a commercial building, we don't have to buy another one. That's all I got.
Mr. Malagon?
I'd just like to call a question, Mr. Chair.
There's a motion to call the question. Is there a second?
I'll
Second.
second.
I have, Mr. Chair, I have a question if that's in order.
If the body would be so kind as to not object to Mr. Redpath's question, I could allow you to ask
okay.
it. Mr.
I'm
Redpath.
okay with that. As the motion maker, I'm okay
I
with
will-
that. I don't know what the treasurer has to say.
My question is, where specifically Mr. Watkins said he submitted a request for an advisory opinion to the FEC. First of all, I don't recall seeing this. Did I miss something? I don't recall seeing this, but where do things stand in terms of a response to the request from the FEC?
I sent an email to, I think it is ao@fec.gov. And when I talked to them over the phone, they said it could take 60 days. And they said to ask for it to be expedited. And I did that.
And how long ago was that? If it would take 60 days, how far into the 60 days are we?
This was a couple of days ago.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
All
Mick
right.
Howard hasn't had any opportunity to talk.
Well, I already called the question, so.
We have unless this gets voted down, then we can, if this gets voted down, we can continue with discussion. If not, it'll go on to a vote. Ms. Harlos, would you like to take roll call on the motion to end discussion?
Sure, one moment. I just need to rename this. And that was moved by Mr. Malagon.
And I think it was seconded by Mr. Lamb or
I don't,
Watkins.
I
Correct.
don't.
Mr. Lamb.
One moment, I need to clear this out here. Okay, Mr. Boss,
Yes.
Mr. Chatterton,
Yes.
Mr. Dar,
No, it seemed there was another vote or speaker.
Mr. Bracco,
Yes.
Mr. Ford.
Yes.
I'm going to vote no. Ms. Hayes,
Yes.
Mr. Lamb,
Yes.
Mr. Malagon,
Aye.
Mr. McGee,
Aye.
Mr. Hirsch. Oh, Mr. Nana came in. Mr. Nana,
Yes.
Mr. Redpath,
No.
Mr. Thompson,
No.
Mr. Benson,
Yep.
Mr. Watkins,
Yes.
Ms. Yanuskavich.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, the vote is 11 yes, 4 no, 0 express abstentions. Would you care to vote?
I will not vote.
Okay, thank you.
And we will go ahead and move on to a vote on the main motion.
One moment. Mr. Bost. Mr. Bost.
Yes.
Mr. Chatterton,
Yes.
Mr. Dar,
Abstain.
Mr. Bracco,
Yes.
Mr. Ford,
I'll pass.
I am abstaining. Ms. Hayes,
Yes.
Mr. Lamb,
Yes.
Mr. Maligan,
Aye.
Mr. McGee,
Aye.
Mr. Nana,
Abstain.
Mr. Redpath,
Abstain.
Mr. Thompson,
No.
Mr. Vincent,
Yes.
Mr. Watkins,
Yes.
Ms. Yanuskavich,
Abstain.
Mr. Ford.
I'll abstain.
One moment. Mr. Chair, it is 8 yes, 1 no, 6 express abstentions. Would you care to vote?
It doesn't require me to vote, so I will abstain.
Point of parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Maligan?
I know we didn't officially do this, but I do assume it seemed that everyone was agreed upon a segregated account that the money would go to. That's still the plan? I was going to move to amend, but I didn't want to go through the whole bit. I assume that's what's going to.
Does the body have any objections to using the funds to put into something like a high yield savings account until we figure out what to do with it?
I have none.
None by me.
No, no objection.
Okay.
I would like to, my only frustration is that in a rush to vote on this, we didn't get a chance to make an amendment that would have required that and made some type of provision for no rush to judgment.
Sorry.
So I support the sale, but I believe we need to come out of this meeting with some language to memorialize the notion that it's going to be in a segregated account and that there'll be some analysis that takes place, of course, subject to some of the timing issues and concerns we have.
So the reason I made the point of parliamentary inquiry instead of doing the amendment was that it seemed, and it seems that the body agrees, it was understood that that's what would happen without having to go through extra steps. The chair has agreed to that. It's in the minutes now. I think it's going to be fine, but the chair can correct me if I'm wrong.
If I could jump in, my concern on that is that people, as we've seen in the last few weeks, we've got some great new people. Things change. It's a lot easier, or I'm sorry, it's a lot more challenge to overcome, I would imagine, some overt action of the board than just a casual, yeah, we all agree we're on the same place. That's why we have these conversations. That's why we formalize these resolutions.
If
I think it's important.
You were heard, Mr. Ford. Right
Chair,
now,
if I
we
may.
got to move on to the next motion, but my commitment to you is I will send an email to the board, CC Hannah Kennedy, let her know the board's intention to use the funds in a high yield savings account, and then let us know the progress of the sale and when that happens.
Mr.
So we can all partake.
Mr. Chair, if I can.
Very quickly.
Yes, this is related to that. If it would make everybody feel better, could we do an email ballot addressing Mr. Ford's concerns?
We could do that also if you want to ratify it.
Mr. Ford, would that work for you?
Absolutely.
Sweet.
Excellent.
Mr. Chair, point of parliamentary inquiry.
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Harless.
It seemed to me, and the way I understood it, was if there was any objection to that to be appended to the motion, that there was no objection. So somebody has a real background that they need to unmute. I think that's Mr. Ford.
Well, guys, we're getting to a bit of debate. The motion was in there. So we do need to move on with the agenda. But if you have more questions or there's more discussion on this,
No,
we can go to the
is
list.
my minutes correct that we did append that, or am I incorrect there?
Oh, that's what you're asking.
Yeah, it was my understanding that our parliamentary posture, that without objection, it was appended to the motion that the money be placed into a high yield account.
Does anybody on the board have any objection to that analysis?
So that was, so Mr. Chair, that was the point of the parliamentary inquiry.
Okay.
I saw that the secretary was already putting it
I
in,
see.
it was understood. So it wouldn't, I mean, if we want to do an additional step with the email ballot, it is what it is.
Okay, then I think that's fine. If there's no objection to it, to that it was already in there, and it seems like everybody was
If I, Mr. Chair, if I may, I mean,
very quickly.
I think high yield is a little it needs to be put into account where there is no risk of loss of principal. I mean, without a high yield account, there are high yield bonds that could lead to loss of principal. I just wanted to say that I will see to it, working with Hannah Kennedy, that it goes, we maximize our interest, but with zero risk of losing principal.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I would just change the language, if I may, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. I would just see if we could change the language to interest-bearing account with no, I'm sorry, what Mr. Redpath said, with no risk to our principal. Interest-bearing, I think, is better than high yield, just because, we don't want to be locked into something and someone's, oh, it's not high yield, but it's all we can get. So I would just say interest-bearing.
No objections, I'll take it. Any objection to going to Vegas and putting it all on black?
Well, I was going to say,
I
I'd
think we
rather
should.
give it to Miss Yanuskavich. Miss Yanuskavich is very well versed in this field, so I would give the money to Miss Yanuskavich and have her put it all in the blackjack tournament. And we could buy a better building, maybe a really big white house in DC. Who knows?
Think about it. We can double our money. All right. Well, we do have to move on to the orders of the day, which is item notice finding.
Mr. Chair, I still have an objection. I first of all,
what is the grounds of your objection, Mr. Ford?
That simply is not just an issue of putting it in a checking account. The word segregated and locked away has to be introduced in some form of parliamentary language. And I trust Mr. Watkins' intent to do that completely, but it's not just high interest or low interest. In other words, it's money. I'll loosely use the word escrow until we decide as a body what's to be done with it. And that's to protect.
Mr. Chair,
I'm going to call it in order what was originally passed without debate. Let's not go changing it. If there's more discussion on this, we can have a separate meeting about it, or we can have a separate motion specifically what kind of account we want to go into. But my commitment is that I will work with Mr. Redpath and the board and Miss Kennedy to make sure the money goes into an account that benefits the board as a safe account. We're not going to lose principal on. There's high yield accounts. There's different methods we can go to. If we decide to do a CD, we can vote on it. So we have options, but this is not appropriate time to discuss this any further. It's not in order. So we have to move on to the next item, which is set the next in-person LNC meeting. I'll go ahead and hand the gavel off to Mr. Dar, and I'll make this really quick. Our convention is going to be in Grand Rapids at the Amway Grand Plaza. We did speak to the hotel. May 16th through the 18th is available for the board to go ahead and meet there. It'll give everybody an opportunity to check out the space, see what we think of it, meet with the people there. It'll give the rest of the Convention Oversight Committee an opportunity to go into the venue. I know Mr. Ford has graciously committed to going there in advance, as well as possibly some members of the COC. I think this is a good spot for us to meet next, as we have a reason to be there. I did an informal poll of some members of the board. The 16th to the 18th looked like a good day. The week before is Mother's Day, and if I spend Mother's Day away from home, I'm going to be stabbed with a rusty spoon by an angry Eastern European woman. So I'd like to stay alive, guys.
Very Florida, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Ford and then Mr. Lamb.
I'll second that motion.
I was going to say second motion. I'll second.
Thank you. Mr. Ford, do you have anything?
Mr. Ford, did you have anything else?
Yeah, just briefly, expect the same type of approach I'm going to make available to members of the board a day in advance for a tour of the local area in the same manner that we did in Rhode Island. So I will be lining up a list of activities, voluntary, of course, to introduce people to the area so that we can begin great word of mouth and providing some real service to our attendees at this convention. So I'll be putting that out well ahead of time, and I hope people can get there a day early for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. Mr. Lamb.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I would just like to agree that I certainly agree with this idea of having the next in-person meeting in Grand Rapids on the weekend of May 17th through May 18th.
Thank you, Mr. Lamb. Mr. Chatterton.
I just wanted to express, it sounds like Mr. Ford will be spearheading a lot of the organizing activities, and I would like to offer my help as the chair of the Michigan LP. If there can be anything I can support locally in the lead up with that, and I think I've got some members in my party that would be happy to help arrange some activities around that if that would be of assistance.
It would be welcome. We're going to do everything we can as part of this convention to showcase the Libertarian Party of Michigan and libertarian activities and leadership in Michigan in general. That's going to be an important part of this convention. So it's welcome, and I look forward to it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chatterton and Mr. Ford. Mr. Redpath.
I call the question.
The question has been called. Is there any objection to calling the question? I'm not hearing an objection to calling the question, so we'll move to the vote. Ms. Harlos?
Give me a moment, I just want to move to end debate.
Mr. Chairman, could we just ask if there's an objection? I don't think this is something that is necessarily roll call worthy.
Okay, that is true. Is there any objection to the, sorry, there's a little bit of background.
Mr. Ford, your background is really bad. If you could mute while, thank you.
If
Thank
we
you,
could
Mr.
just do
Ford.
it moving forward, I'd be fine with that. That's
Yes.
happening.
Is there any objection to the motion?
I only object that Mr. Nana has yet to call the question. That's usually his purview.
I was in
And
line to do
I've
it,
done
and Mr. Redpath beat me to it.
I've done it. Mr. Redpath's done it. Mr. Nana is nowhere to be found.
Thank you, Mr. Nana.
Yes, thank you. I'm not hearing an actual objection, so the motion passes. Thank you. Hand the gavel back over to the chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dar. And then we will go ahead and move on to committee vacancies. The following committees are vacant. We'll go ahead and nominate and then elect
Wait,
members of these
I'm sorry.
committees.
Point of parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Chair. I just
Yes,
want to make
Mr.
sure
Mallard.
we didn't. There was no objection to calling the question, but there's also no objection to the motion. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, I just want. Sorry.
Gotcha. No, good catch. So the following committees have vacancies. APRC has 2 vacancies, the COC has 1, and EPCC has 1. So we'll go ahead and open the floor. Why don't we start with APRC? Are there any nominations for APRC members? And Ms. Harlos, correct me if I'm wrong, are these have to be LNC members, correct? Or can they be non-LNC? They have to be LNC?
Mhm.
Okay. So 2 LNC members for APRC. Are there any nominations, Mr. Dar?
I would like to nominate Mr. Keith Thompson for APRC.
I'll second that.
Mr. Thompson, do you accept?
Yes.
And Ms. Harlos?
One moment. Let me just get that down.
May I nominate Karen Ann Harlos?
Ms. Harlos, do you accept?
Yes, I do.
Right.
May I second that as well?
Well, I have a point of parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Malagon.
Is she not already on the committee?
No, Mr. Malagon, when I was restored by the Judicial Committee, I resigned from the committee out of respect for the former chair. So I still wanted to be on the committee. More peaceful for me not to be with the former chair.
I just wanted clarity. That's fine.
Mr. Watkins?
I'll nominate Mr. Boss.
Mr. Boss, do you accept?
I accept.
I'll second that.
And then Ms. Harlos, one other area I'm trying to remember. The vacancies is, and I probably should have read this before, but I believe APRC, is there a limit due to the structure of the committee? I'm going to go back and check real quick. Or any of
No,
these
I have it on the screen, Mr. Chair. No more than 5.
Gotcha.
Who nominated Mr. Boss, please?
Mr. Watkins.
I put
Would
Mr.
it be appropriate to refer to him as Mr. Boat from now on?
Bodie McBoatface.
Your boat. All right. Anybody else? Ms. Harless, you still have your hand up?
I have my hand up, but it's not for a nomination. It's once well, unless you would indulge me now, I just would.
You can go ahead.
Everyone who's nominated, just know that this is a committee where you have to be able to respond on email very, very rapidly. I had been on APRC since 2016. My average response time is like 15 minutes. Now you don't have to do that. It's just, weaponized autism, but you have to be able to respond within hours. If you're not tied to your email or in your phone, or you have a job where you can't do that, this is not a committee to volunteer for. I'm just making sure everyone's aware of that because it can be intensive.
If you're chronically online, this is the committee for you. Mr. Malagon.
I would just like to call the question and request that the chair do this by the vote by name, so we can just pick two, in other words, two names or roll call, since there's only two spots, and then just go with the majorities.
Okay. Is there any objection to calling the question? All right. Hearing none, you can nominate up to two people. We'll let everybody go through and nominate their picks.
One moment, I'm just getting the ballot set up. So it'd be vote for two.
Correct. And NOTA is always in order.
Oh, I got note on there. All right, Mr. Goss.
I'm sorry, myself and Karen Ann Harless.
Mr. Chatterton.
I will vote for Boston Harlos.
Sorry, Mr. Dar.
I will vote for Thompson and Harlos.
I don't know why it's not folding in that early. It drives me crazy. Mr. Dassing. Mr. Brown.
Boston Harlos.
Oh my God, give me 1 second. That wasn't very nice. I'm not going to worry.
You get extra votes if you paste that in.
Why did it do that? Okay. Mr. Ford.
Mr. Boast and Ms. Harlos.
And I'm not going to vote. Ms. Hayes.
I'm going to throw a curveball and go Thompson and Bust.
Mr. Lamb.
I agree with Ms. Hayes. I will go Mr. Bost and Mr. Thompson.
Mr. Malagon.
Just Mr. Thompson.
Mr. McGee.
Also just Mr. Thompson.
Mr. Nana.
Mr. Thompson and Ms. Harlos.
Mr. Redpath.
Harlos and Thompson.
Mr. Thompson.
Myself and Karen.
Mr. Vincent.
Just Mr. Bost.
Mr. Watkins.
Mr. Bost.
Ms. Januszkiewicz.
Mr. Thompson.
Okay, Mr. Nikela, we have, it's 8-8-9, so there is one tie.
Sudden death.
No one who's already voted, who didn't vote for a second person, doesn't care to cast another vote?
I didn't vote, but I am going to, I guess. So it maybe will not put you in that position. I think it still will. It might create more ties for you.
Oh, you should
I-
vote for bust.
I'm going to vote for myself and Mr. Thompson. So now, oh, now there's not a tie. I thought I was going to create a three-way tie. So it's 8, 9, 10.
All right, I will not vote. Congratulations to Ms. Harlos and Mr. Thompson. All right.
Okay.
Next up is COC, Convention Oversight Committee. There is one vacancy. Karen Ann, do you have the language for the COC? I just want to make sure it's not
It's right there on the screen.
okay.
It's
Minimum of 3. Okay, this is what I was looking out for. So this committee is a minimum of 3 LNC members. 7 members total. Do we know how many members we currently have on COC?
Yeah, it says current membership is Pat Ford, Adam Heyman, Greg Hirsch, Jonathan McGee, Andrew Watkins, Kathy Yanuskavich. Yourself and myself are ex officio. We do not count in the total.
Okay, so this is indeed one vacancy. And since we already have 3 LNC members technically on there, whoever this person is could be LNC or non-LNC. That's my understanding. So we'll go ahead and move to nominations. Mr. Ford?
I'm going to ask the board's indulgence on this. This is going to be, as anyone who served on this committee, and a lot of you folks have, and a lot of folks in the audience have, know that this is a working group. I'm going to be asked the folks to support Justin Carmen to be on the COC. Mr. Carmen is a multi-tool athlete, if this were a draft pick. His expertise and his willingness to stay on credentials will allow us an important link in making folks' arrival at the convention much more expeditious than's happened in the past. The second point is that we've got a pressing need on the committee that's going to be very IT intensive this time around as we try to take our convention into another level in terms of integration with a lot of the new functionality at LNC corporate headquarters. So he serves a couple of purposes, and I put a lot of thought into this, and we're a working active committee already. I really could use Justin's expertise, and quite frankly, his work ethic. I think he's an outstanding participant both at the national and the state level, and really gives heart and soul, and he bleeds for this party. So I'm going to ask people to support him. Thank you.
Mr. Malagon, then Ms. Harlos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question before I make my statement. Do we have a chair of the COC?
Yes, Pat Ford is
Okay.
current chair.
Yep. Did the LNC elect a chair?
That's why I'm asking.
Well, that's a good question, actually. Does the LNC appoint the chair, or does the committee appoint the chair?
The LNC appoints the chair.
LNC appoints the chair.
So there is currently no chair for COC then, is that correct?
Could be correct. If we didn't ratify the decision. I did let the board know that Mr. Ford was my preferred pick as the chair, but of course it's up to the board to make that decision.
I guess that'll be an email motion when the time comes, and that's fine. I would just say, I don't know if there are any other nominees for this position. I would encourage the board to not vote for Mr. Carmen as someone that was previously on the COC. I kind of have an eye for these things, and everything that I said back in November of 2023 turned out to be right, as we all now know. So I respect Mr. Ford's decision, his nomination of Mr. Carmen. I don't know if there are any other nominations, but I would encourage the board. I don't think that's the correct pick. That's all I'll say.
Ms. Harlos and then Mr. Nano.
First I have a question for Mr. Ford, and then might have something else to say. Mr. Ford, I think I got confused. Were you referring to Mr. Carmen's experience with the Credentials Committee last time, or were you saying that he intended on being New York's appointee credentials this time?
I'm sorry, I missed that list. I'm in an airport right now, so forgive me for the background noise. I'll be more attentive to it. Could you just repeat your question a little more
Yeah,
loudly?
you mentioned something about his being on credentials makes him invaluable, and I was unclear whether you were referring to his past credentials experience or that you anticipated he was going to be New York's appointee to credentials again.
He has expressed to me that he would like to be on credentials again. So whatever formalities have to take place outside of, whatever influence I have, are clearly up to New York. I love the idea of having someone I work well with who is an IT person and credentials, adding a lot to the board. And my experience with Mr. Carmen has been excellent. I'm sorry that someone else feels that way. But that being said, even if we were not to be on credentials, the fact that he has experience with that, I think is an important addition to the COC. Thank you.
Okay, so I have two things. I've been on the, excuse me, I dropped a piece of my pen like an idiot. I've been, now on credentials committee as an alternate and on COC. I would want an agreement from Mr. I like Mr. Carmen. I think Mr. Carmen would be good on the convention committee. But I now know it's a nightmare to have people. Credentials is a full-time job. And you need people on COC who are able to run and do tasks. So I would ask that the LNC commit that if Mr. Carmen decides to take a credentials appointment, because we can't tell him not to, that we would remove him from COC. Having both is a nightmare, and I think he'd be great on COC, but on both credentials, it's hard. It's super hard. A convention, they need all of them. And my second inquiry is, does anyone on the LNC, even though I know we got our minimum, but is there anyone else on the LNC that wants to be on COC? Because if there is, I'd nominate them.
Mr. Chair,
If I could respond to Ms. Harlow's, I see.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I raised my hand for
Mr. Malagon, do you have a point of inquiry, or is this?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll address it to you. I was going to nominate Ms. Hallisey. She is the Region 4 alternate. She has expressed the desire to be on the COC, and I would nominate her. I think that she would do a fine job given her background in financial, in the financial field. I think this would be actually a really good move. So I would nominate Ms. Hallisey to fill the vacancy.
I would second that.
All right. And I know you guys are asking questions to each other, but it starts to create a lot of crosstalk, and then people who aren't being recognized to speak. So just keep your questions directed towards the chair so we can keep things going around the merry-go-round. So Mr. Nana. Oh, yeah, no, Mr. Nana, and then Mr. Ford, then Mr. Dar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I may potentially have a nomination, but I wanted to ask, since I got to be honest with you, I don't know Mr. Carmen, and I feel that I personally need to do more research before I cast a vote. I was wondering if the body would be amenable to kicking this to an email ballot so that I can do some more research on all the candidates. And then I would like to make a nomination regardless of what we decide to do. I would like to nominate Kyle Davis.
Is there a second? Or
Seconds
doesn't
are
need a second. I'm sorry. Does he accept, I should say?
He accepts.
Yes.
I knew him earlier.
Okay. Mr. Ford, back to you.
If I could address Ms. Harlow's question about about her concerns about time. Much respect to your role and your service on the Credentials Committee. And I am painfully aware of just how intense it is. You and I have some shared history observing some of those meetings. Mr. Carmen would fill a valuable role that would largely be done before convention time. Right now, I need somebody on the committee who's got heavy IT experience, who can engage at a number of different levels in order to promote some of the IT integration that we want to do and want to work towards in the run up to the convention. So I am certainly willing to work with you on a process that makes Mr. Carmen, if he again is nominated to credentials, make sure that he is able to give full attention to that critical position. Quite frankly, having some experience with credentials, he'll be able to give us some input in our work towards at least doing what we need to do to make sure that credentials is presented the best working environment. But again, that's going to be up until, the IT work, I would imagine, would be largely done, except for some very light maintenance, hopefully, well before the convention process itself. But I need an IT person right now. And by the way, we're willing to add more people to the committee as we move along, get past these first stages. There's plenty of work to go around, but I need IT support.
Mr. Dar?
Sorry, didn't hear that. Was that for me?
Oh, yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Excellent. I just saw a bunch of hands go up after I raised my hand, and I was about to ask about closing nominations. Are the others wanting to make a nomination so that I don't?
Well, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Well, you're up next anyway, so
I'll let Mr. Malagon go then.
All right, Mr. Malagon.
Mr. Chair, if I may. So I was going to say, I do agree with Mr. Nana. I think it's fair. A lot of this presupposes no disrespect to Mr. Ford, but we haven't voted on credentials. We don't know if Mr. Carmen would be on. I personally wouldn't vote for him. I didn't think that he did a great job, and people can disagree. That's fine. But I'm okay with closing nominations and sending this to an email ballot per Mr. Nana's suggestion so that he can make an informed decision as to what he believes is best.
Ms. Januszkiewicz?
I was going to wait on this, but it seems an opportune moment to let you all know that I am resigning from the Convention Oversight Committee. I just have ended up on too many committees that need too much of my time. And, I just want to say one of the roles that I played, or pretty much the predominant role that I played as a volunteer on the last Convention Oversight Committee was working with the numbers, at least the ones that we had, and to track expenses and so forth. And so since I'm resigning, we will need, a financial person to step in. And I believe Trundlin would be good for that. So now there's 2 vacancies.
So we'll go ahead and now with Ms. Januszkiewicz's vacancy, we'll be able to vote for 2 individuals to fill the 2 open vacancies on this committee. So Mr. Chatterton and Mr. Lamb.
Thank you very much. So I wanted to just comment on some of the existing candidates. So hearing from the members, particularly Mr. Ford, already on the committee and started, I think, some of the work already, is at least the presumptive chair, if not formally yet. It sounds like there's been 2 very specific roles that need to be filled, and so I just wanted to speak in favor of Mr. Carmen and Ms. Halsey. Hopefully I said that right. That basically the need for the IT specialist, and with Kathy's resignation, it sounds like Ms. Halsey's got qualifications in that area, so it sounds like we've got 2 well-qualified candidates in consideration for the needs of the committee at this time. So I would encourage for those 2 candidates.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lamb? Mr. Lamb?
He looks frozen.
Oh, am I frozen or is he frozen? He's frozen. We'll come back to him. Mr. Dar.
Mr. Davis is also a highly professional IT individual. It's on the IS committee currently, or was previously. I believe we'll be reforming that. And Mr. Malagon had already was making the motion to close nominations and move to an email ballot. I would like to move that now.
Point of order,
Oh, excuse me. Yes, Ms. Harlow, sorry.
Well, to Mr. Chair, I don't think closing nominations is an order if anyone else has nominations, and there are hands raised, and we don't know if
Okay.
those are nominations. And Mr. Chair, there is a bit of information I'd like to give to the LNC if you would indulge me, but if not, that's okay.
Is it germane
It
to
is.
this nomination? Go ahead.
The Convention Oversight Committee is empowered to appoint subordinate committees on their own. If Mr. Ford had wanted to appoint a subordinate IT group for the Convention Oversight Committee, he can do that and put as many people on it as he'd like. So when there's specific needs, there are subordinate committees. So that's the way to handle when you need somebody who's a specific task.
Well, I have a point of order, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
I just want to remind everybody, as someone who has served as chair of the COC in the past, we do have staff. So this IT conversation is interesting to me. Mr. Hudson and Mr. Gargan are both, and Mr. Bokovich are all very capable and have served the committee very well. Staff takes care of the IT needs, and no one is more qualified to do that. So I don't understand why that's a prerequisite for some people. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Mr. Nana, then Mr. Boss, then Mr. Thompson.
Yeah, what's happening right now is exactly why I suggested we kick this to an email ballot. And I think Mr. Dar was trying to make that motion. I don't know if anybody else has nominations, but I would either remake the motion that was never given a chance to give it a second for Mr. Dar and or second his motion to add closed nominations and kick this to an email ballot.
Well, let me ask real quick. I'll open for 20 seconds. Does anybody have any other nominations for COC? Go ahead and shout them out now. Going once, going twice, going 3 times. Does that answer your question, Mr. Nana?
Yep, and I would like that motion to be on the floor for a second.
Okay, so it's a motion
Second,
to defer this to an email ballot. There was a second.
me, Meredith Hayes.
Meredith Hayes. Is there any objection to moving this to an email ballot? All right, well, hearing no objection, we'll go ahead and defer this to email ballot.
And just to be clear, Mr. Chair, as a point
Yes.
of inquiry, will this be, I'm assuming that there's 2 vacancies now, so people will just, with 1 name or 2 names or NODA, correct?
Correct. Yeah, up to 2 names. We're not going to do 3. We're just up to 2 names like we did in the last ballot. And that's how we'll handle it. Mr. Boston, Dana Carver, I don't know who that is. Mr. Boston, is that an artifact or did you have something to say?
I was going to speak in favor of Mr. Carmen, but if that's out of order right now.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. The last item for vacancies is EPCC. We do have 1 EPCC vacancy. So we'll go ahead and entertain nominations. Mr. Boss and then Mr. Thompson.
That was an artifact.
Gotcha. Mr. Thompson.
I would like to nominate Jesse Coward.
Do they accept?
I do.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Yanuskavich.
I would like to nominate Mr. Malagon.
Does Mr. Malagon accept?
I do, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Karen Ann?
I had a question just because he was interested in a different committee. Is Mr. Bost interested in this committee?
Mr. Bost?
Yes.
I would nominate Mr. Bost.
All right.
Mr. Chair, could I just share with everyone the nature of this committee
Sure.
and when we meet and so forth?
Absolutely.
So currently, I'm the chair of the committee. Mr. Watkins is on the committee. The vacancy was created when Mr. Nikela became chair. Chair is a ex officio member of the EPCC. We meet every other Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern with the executive director. I'm pretty, I'd like to stick with that time. It works well for everyone, and it also works well for our executive director. And we review staff agreements, policies, and procedures. We're going to be writing some new policies and procedures. We're going to be working on KPIs to integrate that into some of our contracts, and which is the reason why I have nominated Mr. Malagon, as he has some experience with that type of thing.
Mr. Thompson, your hand is still up. Did you, and Karen, did you both?
Oh, no,
still...
I meant to take mine down.
Sorry. No worries. Mr. Nana.
I would move to close nominations.
Motion to close nominations. Is there a second?
I'll second, and I'd like to, if we'd like to speak to our nominations, I'd be amenable to that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. If there's no objection to closing nominations, I'll give each candidate 2 minutes to speak to their qualifications. We'll start with Ms. Cowart.
Hi, everyone. I'm new here. Wanted to just share a little bit of my experience in this area. So I've worked in HR outsourcing for 14 years, also serve as a project manager and manager of others in my professional career. Also serve as vice chair of LP Texas, which incidentally is actually kicking off a committee that I will be leading in parallel with this. So have good experience with employee management, W-2 1099-R type of employment engagement. So welcome any additional questions that this body has for me.
Any questions for Ms. Cowart? You got 60 seconds. All right. If not, thank you, Ms. Cowart. Welcome to the LNC. Mr. Malagon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have worked in recruitment, sales, and business development for about 15 years now in my professional career. I have worked for probably 6 startups, give or take. I'm very familiar with contracts, what needs to be done. As a contractor myself, I'm also familiar with contracts on that side. So I think that I would be a valuable asset to the LNC should they choose to appoint me. So I would be happy to work with the EPCC and oversee some of the contracts and put some of those terms in, and as we review everything, as Ms. Yanuskevich said. So I would also welcome any questions from the LNC should they feel the need.
Any questions for Mr. Malagon? All right. Mr. Bost.
Hi, I'm Travis Bost. I am the vice chair of the Libertarian Party of West Virginia. I take this position very seriously. I think it's very important. I am willing and able to give the time necessary and the consideration to all the whatever contracts and personnel that come before us. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, candidates. We will go ahead and move on to I guess we'll just do a roll call vote. You pick one, and that's it. So, Mr. Harlos, whenever you're ready. Ms. Harlos, whenever you're ready.
Let me get up. Oh, I hate when my screen moves. Let me just close these tabs. And that will be here. Let me get the candidates in here. For Boss, Howard, and
Is this a plurality vote or what?
Well, it's going to be one. There's only one position open. We could do it one of 2 ways. We could give everybody one vote, or we could do plurality.
I think plurality is what is a majority required. Like, will it just be the top vote getter, whether or not they got a majority, or is a majority required?
I would assume it would.
Top vote getter probably would just be easier.
Yeah, I would say top vote getter.
Okay, and so it's vote for one?
Unless there's objection. Everybody's cool with that. We'll do vote for one, make it easy. All right.
Mr. Bost?
Myself.
Mr. Chatterton? I'll come back to
Mr. Bost.
you. Thank you. Mr. Dar,
Ms. Cowart,
Mr. Bracco,
Mr. Bost.
Mr. Ford, Mr. Ford. I'll come back to
At
him.
an airport. Maybe he had to get on a plane. I don't know.
I'll be back in a moment. I'm just doing a butt luggage thing.
Okay, I'll come back to you. I'm going to pass, Ms. Hayes,
Mr. Maligan,
Mr. Lamb,
Mr. Bost.
Mr. Maligan,
I'll vote for myself. Thank you.
Mr. McGee,
Mr. Maligan.
Mr. Nana,
I'll pass.
Mr. Redpath,
I'll vote Coward.
Mr. Thompson,
Ms. Cowart.
Mr. Benson,
Bost.
Mr. Watkins,
Mr. Bost.
Ms. Yanuskavich,
Mr. Maligan,
okay, we're gonna go back up. Mr. Ford,
Mr. Bost, please.
okay, I was impressed with Ms. Coward's, never mind, I don't need to explain. Mr. Nana,
What's the vote total?
it is 744.
No, my vote doesn't matter, but my region would like me to vote for Miss Cowart.
Okay, Mr. Nikela, it is 754.
I will not vote.
Okay.
Congratulations to Mr. Boss. All right, so we are humming along. We've got about 43 minutes left. Next is Audit Committee update by Ms. Yanuskavich.
Bore, sorry, I'm sorry, Mr. Boss, you've been a boat, you've been a bore. Like the, never mind. I'm just digging a hole deeper. I'm sorry.
okay,
Yeah.
the update. The audit committee, consisting of myself, Rich Bowen, Doug Nebel, has met twice. Mr. Bowen was elected as chair. We have voted to accept the proposal from Lehman Flynn Valaro CPAs to prepare the audit and to prepare and audit the 2024 financial statements and prepare the tax forms. This is the same firm that we used last year. We were happy with the firm's work last year and happy with their cost proposal for 2024, especially in light of the additional work this year due to the convention and the Kennedy Victory Fund. If anyone is concerned, we are going to be billing the Kennedy Victory Fund at least a portion of the audit to offset additional work due to the fund. The next step is that we will have Stephen sign a letter of engagement, which should happen this week, and then we will get on the firm's calendar, and we intend to provide updates on the audit and so forth at each meeting.
All right. Any questions for Ms. Yanuskavich? Hearing none, thank you, Ms. Yanuskavich. We will go ahead and move on.
Mr. Nikela,
Yes, Ms. Harlow.
you skipped an item.
Did I?
Well, it was just, there are remaining committee appointments and it was planned to fill remaining committee
Oh,
vacancies, and there's some that are coming up that are urgent. At our next LNC meeting, the Ballot Access Committee will be dissolved upon their final report. I think we should be sending out applications for the next Ballot Access Committee, and the Bylaws Committee, we have a bylaws deadline of May 22nd to appoint them, so I think we should be appointing those at the next LNC meeting as well. And we probably should send out applications
Yes, let's please do so. And we get to 5 states, and if you could also please notify California, Florida, New York, Pennsylvania, and Texas to submit their credentials committee appointments.
Well, they're due at the end of the year, I believe. But
Oh,
yeah,
gotcha.
I've
Okay, these are
already,
upcoming. I see.
I've started notifying these states when last term because we knew the appointments. But I do stay in touch with the platform committee states and the credential states. So I will do that. Do you want me to work with staff on, because there is a Zoho application form on the forms and getting an email prepared that will then go through APRC and we'll start to collect applications for
Sure.
bylaws and for ballot access. But there's also IS, like, I don't know what, I'll work on this with staff. Just let me know what committees we want to get right on.
Uh, Mr. Redpath, as far as the ballot access committee, do you know if any of those members wish to reapply or you have some turnover there?
I don't know. I mean, Mr. Nana
Right.
is chair of the ballot access committee to the, I believe. I really don't know. I mean, speaking for myself, I'd like to continue to serve on the committee. Regarding everybody else on the committee, I can't speak for them.
Okay. So if you could maybe copy and paste this to the internal list, Karen Ann, that way the region reps can tap their regions for people as well, because I'm sure they're going to want to submit names. And then once we submit the application form, and then we'll disseminate that, suit it out to the board, and then we can have a future meeting where we go through the appointees. How does that sound?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay.
And then I'll start working on it. And just one comment to the LNC, and I'll put this on our own list as well. Of course, the LNC does not need to do this, but the bylaws committee is appointed entirely by the LNC. The bylaws committee last convention met for 14 months, every other week, and none of their report got heard. I would highly recommend that the LNC, if the past appointees are willing to reappoint the same people so that their work is honored. And they can choose whether they want to submit the same proposals or not. But that is just so disrespectful to volunteers to have them work for 14 months every other week and just never got heard.
All right. Well, I think we are. Well, Mr. Ford, then we'll continue.
Karen Ann, I was having an informal meeting today on COC, and that was noted. And I promise you, I will do everything possible to make sure that those folks' work is not only honored, but highlighted. Obviously there were issues at the last convention that I don't think anyone could have anticipated, but your point is spot on, and I will work aggressively to honor that.
All right.
I'm probably going to make a motion on the list that to direct me, because I'm former bylaws chair, to contact all of the former members of the committee to see if they would be willing to serve again. And then I'm probably going to make a motion to everyone who is willing to reserve again that because probably all of them are not going to be, and we'll still have some appointees. But I think everyone who finished out that term should get first crack at it.
All right. Well, I think we know what we need to do for the remainder of the committees. So we'll go ahead and we'll get those sent out, and we'll get this sent up maybe at a future, whenever we feel comfortable. We'll bring it up at a future meeting. So next up is communications of LNC and subcommittees, and I understand there's several motions here. All right, Mr. Malagon has moved the following, and I believe these are all separate motions. So we'll go through one by one. To require the LNC to do a daily dump effective immediately of all their communication with each other, where anything that could be considered LNC or LP business is discussed, including but not limited to phone calls, record them where the state law allows, text, emails, and all direct messages. Is there a second?
If I may
I
speak to my motion, well,
I had a
have
point of information, Mr. Chair. I mean, a request for information.
Request for information, Ms. Harlows?
It was my understanding that Mr. Malagon intended to move them as a group, but I could be
Oh, Mr. Malagan, is that your intention to move them all as a group?
Yeah, for the sake of time, why not? They're all the same. They all accomplish the same goal, so sure.
Would you like to, well, I guess we need a second first before we could speak to it.
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Hayes. So, if I may, Mr. Chair, I'd like to speak to the motions.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Malagon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, I sat in on the Judicial Committee hearing from, I think it was last Saturday, if I'm not mistaken. Uh, in any case, not this past Saturday, but the one before then. But I was just moved by the arguments. There are a lot of people that pay $25 a year, and they want to know what we're talking about and doing in real time, and they want to know when we're texting each other, when we call each other to, convince each other of votes. And that was the reason of the whole appeal, right? Is the public business list. They think that there is some sort of innocuous secrecy happening. So let's put it all out there, right? Why not? Let's go ahead. I was very moved by those arguments. They were very, very compelling. Let's go ahead, and anytime that any LNC member speaks to one person, whether it be phone call or whether it be by text or Discord or other direct messaging system, I think it's very, very important. Why have confidential committees? The entire membership should be aware of what's happening on the COC or the EPCC. Let's put all that aside. Let's make it very clear, since we don't have an understanding as to what subjectivity versus objectivity is, as far as what quote unquote secrecy is, as was made at least clear by a couple of Judicial Committee members and the appeal itself. Let's go ahead and abolish it as a whole. Whatever anyone defines as secrecy, let's let that be the mantle that we fly, right? So let's go ahead and do it. I really think, and another thing that was really brought up, and to get to the final point here, it's that people just vote and there's no reason, there's no debate, whatever. Everyone should be required to give a minimum. And I think 500 words it's probably on the lower end, but everyone should give a full explanation to why they're doing what we're doing. I mean, earlier today, we just had probably the most unqualified person as part of one of the most important committees. So let's have everyone explain their vote, right? I don't see a problem with this. I think that it's very, very important. I'm doing this for the membership because they demand transparency as they see fit, however they see fit, and we should give it to them, right? So, I mean, I was told unironically here when this was before I was chair of California, that live streaming a convention and spending almost $1,000 to live stream a convention for the 5 people that watch it that aren't even at convention, is part of transparency, and that it's really, really important that the 5 people, be able to watch this on YouTube, and that we spend $1,000 for them, even though they can't vote and they can't do anything. But that doesn't matter, because transparency is very, very important. So this is why I thought it was very prudent to move these things so that the membership could have everything that they want. And any member that doesn't vote for this clearly hates transparency, has no common sense. And I would urge everyone to very much vote in favor of these motions, because if we don't have transparency, are we really any better than the Democrats and the Republicans? Are we really a political party and a professional organization if we don't do stuff like this? So anyway, that's my reasoning. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Malagon. I'm going to go ahead and call this all out of order because I do think it is very subjective, and I also hate transparency. So we'll just go ahead and move on then to, unless there's objection or anybody who wishes to overrule the ruling of the chair, we will go on to
I'd like to double down on the ruling of the chair, actually.
I would appeal the ruling of the chair if we weren't on a time crunch, but I'm very disappointed, Mr. Chair, that you do not want to share your private communications with the body. As an unpaid volunteer who has taken on a ridiculous task, we should all be able to see your phone and what you do at any given time. I want to know what's happening at Wendy's, and I want to know what's happening on the LNC. So I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I do respect you, but I'm very disappointed that you would rule this out of order. I really wanted to see all of your texts and all of your phone calls and listen to them like a podcast.
The Browns are
If
getting out of hand.
if we get the right Libertarian on the NSA, we may get the levels of transparency we want.
I will keep you apprised, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Ms. Harless, did you have any motions under
No,
communications?
mine was going to be a substitute to the Malagon motion, and since that was ruled out of order, the substitute, I mean, I could still move it, but I'm content to just wait for the JC decision because all my motion was going to do was resolve it outside the JC. So I'm content to wait for the JC.
All right. And then Mr. Lamb, did you have a point of inquiry or because it's already past debate?
Yeah, it's already passed, so unfortunately I can't say, but I strongly agree with Mr. Magalon, and I'm happy that
Malagon,
you've
man,
ruled
it's
it
so
out.
easy.
Hey,
Malagon.
Mr.
Try it. Say
Magalon,
it with
I
me.
apologize.
Malagon.
Magalon.
Malagon.
All right, guys.
Magalon. Thank you.
No, Malagon. Oh, so close, yet so far.
English is not my first language. I apologize.
It's not mine either, but I figured it out.
All right. Let's go to item 6, affirm zealous defense of trademarks. Mr. Chatterton.
Mr. Chair, thank you. In light of productive ongoing discussions offline with this matter, I would refrain from bringing this motion today.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Chatterton. Wow, we beat the timer. We're ahead. We didn't have to go to 9 o'clock. Congratulations. So about an hour and 2 minutes we're in. So
I will move to adjourn, Mr. Chair.
well, really quick before we do that, announcements. I do have one announcement. LNC members, please stay on after the call when it's just us. I do want to talk to you guys about a fundraising initiative that we're going to be going into by the end of next month, and I need your participation and support. So, Aaron, Pat, did you have anything you want to announce real quick?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry.
Go
Go
ahead,
ahead, Aaron.
Pat. You're absolutely welcome.
Okay.
I'll go after you, sir.
Thank you. I just want to point out that you should have received the emails. The theme contest is up and running for the Grand Rapids Convention. Our hope is to get this the theme in line so that we can move on with our branding of the convention. So I'm just asking everyone to participate, everyone to support, everyone. Let's make it fun. And I just, I thought the last convention, the theme was incredibly compelling. And I hope we can all, as a group, come up with something similar. So we're off and running with convention stuff, and expect a few more announcements in the next week or two. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. Mr. Lamb.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I would just like to speak announcement-wise regarding Austin Martin of the Hawaii Party with the email thread that came through that he had copied us on. I do think it was inappropriate that he had copied the entire LNC regarding this. I think it would be more appropriate to just copy the chair or his region reps, which of course are myself and Mr. Chatteron. But I do agree that his complaint does have merit, and it's something that we should look into further as an LNC. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lamb. And I'm more than welcome to sit down with you and Mr. Chatterton and go over what the specifics of his complaint are. And I encourage Austin to go through those channels, which would be you or you and Andrew, and we'll discuss this together and find the best way forward to try to correct or get whatever he needs done. So yeah,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Yep. Mr. Malgo.
I changed my mind, Mr. Chair. Apologies.
I'm sorry?
I changed my mind. Apologies.
Oh, okay. All right. Any other announcements? All right. Well,
here I will move to adjourn, Mr. Chair, if now is the appropriate time.
Thank you very much.
I will second that.
In a second. Any objections to adjournment?
None.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Go in peace and enjoy your Sunday evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
All right. And then Ms. Harless, please stop the recording, and then LNC members, if you could please stay on.
Sure.
I won't take up too much of your time since we got out early. We want to use that precious